Hey everybody, Matt here for Imagine Then Make. This video is going to be a follow-up video to my most recent video where, if you saw it, you saw me doing some scrolling using a spiral blade here and sort of comparing the cuts I was making with a spiral blade with a more traditional flat blade. So in this video, I want to try tandem cutting. Now stick with me for a couple of minutes and I'll show you what I mean. So just like in the last video, I'm going to use the same spiral blade here and also the same pin end blade, which happens to be flat. So I'm going to be using the same spiral blade that I used in the previous video. It's from Olson, universal number 4 blade, 36 teeth per inch, 41 thousandths of an inch kerf. And I'm also going to be using the same flat blade that I used in the last video. Happens to be a pin end blade, fairly fine teeth. So I'm going to be using the same two blades that I did in the last video. So for this video, what I want to do is use this paper template and a piece of carbon paper and to copy the design over to this scrap piece of MDF. Then I'm going to cut these 4 interlocking jigsaw puzzle pieces out using the flat blade. It should make a very thin kerf along the cut line, which I'm thinking will make the pieces relatively difficult to assemble and disassemble, but we'll see. Then I'm going to copy the same template over to another area on my MDF, again with carbon paper. I'll make all the cuts on the second set of pieces, first with the flat blade, and then I'll tape all those pieces together and make a second pass over the same cut using the spiral blade. This should give me a wider kerf between the 4 pieces, which should make the pieces easier to assemble and disassemble. So having said that, you might wonder, why shouldn't I just cut out the second set of pieces just using the spiral blade? Why bother making the first cut using the flat blade? Well, this is kind of one I want to test out a little bit. In my previous video, I found that it was fairly difficult for me to stay on the cut line using the spiral blade. My cut came out kind of wobbly. And here I have some nice circular cuts. I want to stay as true to that as I can. So I thought if I made the first set of cuts using the flat blade and sticking pretty close to the cut line, and then followed up by going over the same cut using the spiral blade to give me a wider kerf, maybe my cuts will stay just as accurate, only with a wider kerf. That should make the pieces easier to assemble and disassemble. So that's the theory. Now I'm going to put it to the test. So just as a quick reminder, in the last video I showed you that the kerf that this spiral blade makes is, well, it's 41 thousandths of an inch wide, and here you can see it in a piece of MDF. And you can also see that the cut is not very straight. The flat blade makes a very narrow kerf. You can visibly see the difference. So the idea is to cut out the puzzle pieces using the flat blade that produces a very narrow kerf, and then go over the cut using the spiral blade just to widen up the kerf. So let's see if this works. So I've got the puzzle pieces copied off of the template through the carbon paper onto my MDF. And of course, in the process of doing that, I realized that I don't need to make that cutout there. So there's just the 4 curves and then the straight cuts. So you just saw me cut out these 4 pieces using the flat blade, and boy, I did not stay very close to the cut line at all. I definitely need some more practice, and I probably need a narrower blade to make this tight of a turn, but that's an excuse. I can see that I need more practice. The other thing that kind of surprised me here is that these pieces do assemble and disassemble pretty easily. So even the narrow kerf from the flat blade seems to make very usable jigsaw puzzle pieces. So that kind of shoots a hole in my whole theory here of needing to do tandem cutting to get enough kerf to make the pieces assemble and disassemble easily. But I'm going to keep going, so I'm going to cut out the second set of pieces, and this time I think I will just, well, I guess I'll stick to the original plan. I'll cut out these 4 pieces using the same flat blade, and then tape them all together with packing tape, clear packing tape, and then go over the cuts with the spiral blade and see how that works out. Alright, so here's the second set of 4 jigsaw puzzle pieces cut out. using the same flat blade produces a narrow kerf, but the pieces disassemble and assemble quite easily. So and this time around I was much closer to the cut line. I went a little off here, but here I'm much closer. Here went a little bit off right there, but overall this set of 4 pieces is better than the first set. So what I want to do now is tape these pieces together using the clear packing tape, change out my blade for the spiral blade, go over the same cuts, see if I stay just as close to the cut line as I did originally, and then see how the pieces fit together. If maybe they're just too loose with the wider kerf. We'll see. So I've got these pieces taped up with clear packing tape, and now I'm going to go over the same cut lines using the spiral blade. So that was actually kind of interesting. I think the original premise was good in that it was much easier to follow the previous cut with the spiral blade than if I just tried to make the cuts originally with the spiral blade. I think my cuts would not have been as accurate. But like I said in the previous video, maybe with some more practice, it won't be necessary. I'll get skilled enough to make the original cuts with the spiral blade and stay pretty close to the cut line. I know some guys do it. I'm just not, I don't have that much confidence yet. So that part I think was correct. The idea of following up the flat blade cut with the spiral blade. That's what I'm calling tandem cutting. The other part that I kind of assumed is that the pieces cut with the flat blade these were cut with the flat blade, and these were recut using the spiral blade, and I think you can see the difference in the kerf. Let me move the camera. Alright, so here are the pieces cut with the flat blade, and you can see that there's still, even with such a narrow kerf, there's still plenty of, let's call it wiggle room, to allow the pieces to be disassembled and assembled. And then these are the pieces that were recut using the spiral blade, and you can see that they are much looser. But I'm thinking that this is too loose. I don't know, what do you guys think? I think if I was to give somebody a jigsaw puzzle with pieces cut with this much kerf, that would be acceptable. This just seems like it's too loose to me. But what I did get out of doing this video is that doing tandem cutting, running the spiral blade over a previously made cut using the flat blade, makes the spiral blade cut that much more accurate. I don't know if you can really see with the camera, but that's a pretty straight line, and I'm not so confident with just the spiral blade that I could make that straight of a line without having made a cut using the flat blade first. All right, so I decided to do one more set of these. So I copied the template over, again with carbon paper. I still have the spiral blade installed. So I thought I would cut these with just the spiral blade and then compare this set with the other two sets that I cut previously, and we'll see what we get. All right, so here's the third set of puzzle pieces that I cut with just the spiral blade. And this is the second set, which was tandem cut, first with the flat blade and then followed up with the spiral blade. And I'm looking at this line right here. And to my eye, although it may be hard for you to see on the camera, I think this line is straighter than this line. This line looks a little bit wavy. So I think tandem cutting produced a straighter line. But it may be really hard for you to see on the camera. If I zoom in, I'm looking at this line right here, and it looks a little bit wavier than the same line on the other set. And of course, this is the set that was tandem cut. So hopefully you got something out of this grand experiment here. I know I learned a few things. Thanks for watching.